Their television screens went black without warning. Then something impossible stared back at them. A figure in a grotesque rubber mask, gyrating wildly behind spinning corrugated metal, had seized control of Chicago's airwaves and was broadcasting directly into hundreds of thousands of homes. No explanation, no sound, just 25 seconds of pure, inexplicable intrusion that defied every security protocol in broadcast engineering. This was November 22, 1987, at exactly 9:14 p.m., and someone had just done what experts swore was impossible. They overpowered WGN-TV's signal, one of the most powerful television stations in the Midwest, with equipment that shouldn't exist outside million-dollar broadcast facilities. Then, as suddenly as the masked figure appeared, it vanished. The regular programming returned, and engineers across Chicago sat in stunned, terrified silence, trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. But the hijacker wasn't finished. 3 hours later, at 11:15 p.m., the nightmare returned, and this time, it spoke. WTTW Channel 11, Chicago's PBS affiliate, was broadcasting an episode of Doctor Who when the signal died again. The Max Headroom mask reappeared, but now a distorted, inhuman voice emerged from behind the latex, rambling in bizarre phrases, making obscene gestures, humming television theme songs. For 90 seconds, an eternity in broadcast television, the figure performed like a deranged puppet show while an unseen accomplice struck them repeatedly with a fly swatter. The audio was deliberately warped, making voice identification impossible. The video swayed drunkenly as if shot handheld. And then, mid-sentence, the broadcast cut back to Doctor Who, leaving viewers across Chicago questioning their own sanity. The FCC launched an emergency investigation within hours. The FBI joined within days. What had just occurred wasn't a prank. It was a federal crime punishable by $100,000 in fines and imprisonment. But more terrifying than the legal implications was the technical reality. To hijack a broadcast signal of this magnitude required a powerful transmitter, intimate knowledge of microwave frequencies, split-second timing, and physical proximity to transmission towers. Whoever did this had to be close, within direct line of sight to overpower the legitimate signal. They needed professional-grade equipment worth tens of thousands of dollars. They needed expertise that suggested years of training in broadcast engineering. Phil Bradford, a WGN engineer, delivered the most chilling assessment to investigators. The hijacker's signal was stronger than the station's own transmission. Someone had built or acquired equipment powerful enough to override a major network affiliate. The implications sent shockwaves through the FCC. If they could hijack a television signal, what else could they hijack? Emergency broadcasts? Military communications? What if next time the masked figure didn't broadcast absurdist comedy? What if they broadcast something far darker? Investigators descended on transmission facilities, interviewed every broadcast engineer in Chicago, examined access logs and security footage. They found nothing. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no suspects. The Max Headroom hijacker had executed one of the most brazen acts of broadcast terrorism in American history and vanished like a ghost into static. But the tapes remained, and buried in those 90 seconds of distorted chaos were clues that would haunt investigators for decades. The FBI agents who sat in a darkened room watching the WTTW recording frame by frame realized something that made their investigation infinitely more disturbing. This wasn't random chaos. The 90-second performance was coded. Hidden within the manic gyrations and distorted ramblings were inside jokes, specific cultural references, and targeted mockery aimed at someone who would understand the message. And whoever that person was, they were keeping silent. The figure's warped voice delivered what seemed like nonsensical phrases at first. "He's a frickin' nerd." Then humming the theme song to Clutch Cargo, an obscure 1950s cartoon. A crude imitation of WGN sportscaster Chuck Swirsky followed, with the masked figure declaring Max Headroom was better than Chuck Swirsky. But one phrase cut through the absurdity with razor precision. When the hijacker announced, "I stole CBS," and erupted into maniacal laughter. CBS. The intrusions had targeted WGN and WTTW. What did CBS have to do with anything? Was this a reference to a previous unreported hijacking, or an inside joke about broadcast industry politics that only insiders would recognize? Investigators discovered that the year prior, in April 1986, a similar but far cruder signal intrusion had occurred when a satellite dish owner hijacked HBO's feed to protest new scrambling technology. That hijacker had been identified and prosecuted within weeks. But this was different, more sophisticated, more theatrical, more deliberate. The choice of Max Headroom itself seemed significant. The grotesque computer-generated British television host had become a cult phenomenon, representing the intersection of technology, media, and corporate broadcasting. Was the hijacker making a statement about media control? Or was the mask simply chosen for maximum psychological impact? The technical analysis made the crime even more impossible. John McDougall, a veteran broadcast engineer, told the Chicago Tribune what everyone in the industry was thinking. This wasn't some kid with ham radio. To execute both hijackings required split-second timing, knowledge of microwave transmission paths, and access to mobile equipment capable of overpowering signals reaching millions. The equipment alone would cost tens of thousands of dollars. This was someone who understood broadcast engineering at a professional level, or multiple people working in coordination. And that detail, the presence of at least 2 perpetrators, opened the most disturbing questions. In the final moments of the WTTW hijacking, as the masked figure bent forward, an accomplice's hand entered the frame, wielding a fly swatter, striking them repeatedly in what appeared to be a crude spanking. The sexual undertone, the casual violence, the complete theatrical commitment to something so bizarre. This wasn't impulse, this was rehearsed. 2 or more people had planned this together, practiced the performance, coordinated the technical execution with military precision, and then they had simply disappeared. The FCC opened an official investigation file and offered substantial rewards for information. Tips flooded in, over 200 within the first month, but every lead evaporated. Every suspect had an alibi. Every theory collapsed under scrutiny. Someone out there knew the truth. Someone had helped build the equipment, rehearse the performance, coordinate the timing. Someone was an accomplice. Someone was keeping the secret. And they were all watching the investigation from the shadows, staying perfectly, terrifyingly silent. By early 1988, the investigation had generated over 200 tips from the public, and every single one led nowhere. The FBI's Chicago field office had assembled a task force that included broadcast engineers, signal analysts, and criminal investigators, but they were chasing someone who seemed to understand exactly how to avoid detection. The hijacker had left no physical evidence at any transmission site, no equipment behind, no traceable signal origin. It was as if they had materialized out of thin air, committed their crime, and dissolved back into static. What frustrated investigators most was the geographic puzzle. To hijack WGN's signal at 9:14 p.m., the perpetrator needed to be positioned with line-of-sight access to the Sears Tower, where WGN's transmitter was located. 3 hours later, they, or an accomplice, had to be in position near the Hancock building to override WTTW's signal. the locations were miles apart. Either multiple people were involved with coordinated timing, or someone had moved between positions with mobile equipment. Both scenarios required resources, planning, and technical capability far beyond amateur radio enthusiasts. Former FCC engineer William Hardin provided a chilling assessment. Whoever did this could have broadcast anything: child pornography, terrorist propaganda, instructions for building bombs, anything. They chose absurdist comedy, but they proved they had the power to reach hundreds of thousands of homes with whatever message they wanted. The implications rippled through the broadcast industry. If one person or group could hijack major market television stations, what was stopping others? What was stopping someone with darker intentions? Security at transmission facilities across the country was immediately upgraded. The FCC issued emergency technical bulletins. Broadcast engineers began monitoring their signals with paranoid vigilance. But the Max Headroom hijacker never struck again, which only deepened the mystery. Why stop? Why execute two perfect intrusions and then vanish forever? Investigators focused intently on the content of the broadcast itself, believing the rambling monologue contained clues to the perpetrator's identity. The reference to Chuck Swirsky, WGN's sports anchor, seemed personal, suggesting someone with a grudge against the station or its staff. The mention of stealing CBS remained unexplained, but hinted at inside knowledge of broadcast industry politics. And the choice of Doctor Who as the second target seemed deliberate. The show had a devoted cult following in Chicago, and interrupting it guaranteed maximum attention from a specific demographic. One lead seemed promising. Several tips pointed to disgruntled former broadcast engineers who had recently been fired or had grievances with Chicago television stations. FBI agents interviewed dozens of individuals with the technical knowledge to pull off the hijacking, but alibis checked out or the evidence was purely circumstantial. No one could be definitively placed near the transmission sites at the crucial times. By mid-1988, the active investigation began to wind down. The case remained open, but resources were redirected to other priorities. The Max Headroom hijacker had committed one of the most audacious crimes in FCC history and gotten away with it completely. But the story wasn't over. Someone knew the truth, and decades later, they would almost come forward.
23 years of perfect silence shattered on a single night in 2010, when an anonymous Reddit user posted a confession that stopped the internet cold. "I know who did this. It was my brother and his friend. They were working in broadcast engineering at the time. My brother is still alive, but he's terrified of coming forward because the legal consequences could still be devastating." The post remained visible for less than 3 hours before the author deleted it, but screenshot hunters had already captured every word. For the first time since 1987, the Max Headroom hijacker's identity seemed within reach. And then, just as quickly, the trail went cold again. The Reddit confession ignited a digital wildfire. Amateur detectives descended on the case with resources that hadn't existed in 1987. Digitized archives, enhanced audio analysis software, crowdsourced investigation networks spanning thousands of contributors. They combed through Chicago Tribune microfilm, broadcast industry newsletters from the 1980s, television station employment records that had been digitized and leaked online. Every frame of the hijacking video was enhanced. Every syllable of distorted audio was isolated and analyzed. Every background detail was magnified, searching for overlooked clues, a reflection in the metal, a visible tattoo, a distinctive piece of equipment that could be traced. One discovery seemed to crack the case wide open.
Enhanced audio analysis suggested the voice distortion wasn't professional broadcast equipment. It was a guitar effects pedal, specifically a model popular among musicians and audio engineers in the mid-1980s. This narrowed the profile dramatically. The hijacker wasn't just a broadcast engineer. They were someone comfortable with performance, someone who understood audio processing from multiple angles, someone embedded in both technical and creative communities, someone who had rehearsed this bizarre theatrical piece and felt confident enough to improvise cultural references on live television. Then, in 2013, the case exploded again. A Chicago-area man identifying himself only as Jay contacted multiple investigative journalists with a claim that froze their blood. He had worked at a television station in 1987, and in the weeks following the hijacking, certain colleagues had bragged about it during late-night drinking sessions. He provided names. Specific names of people with the technical knowledge, equipment access, and personality profiles that matched the crime. But when journalists began verification, Jay stopped responding. His phone went to voicemail. His email bounced back. He had provided just enough information to tantalize, then vanished completely, leaving investigators with names they couldn't legally pursue without corroborating evidence. Former FBI Special Agent Joseph Casey, who had led the original investigation, retired in 1995 with the case still unsolved. In a haunting 2015 interview with Vice magazine, Casey admitted what everyone suspected. "We had theories, we had suspects, but we never had proof." Whoever did this understood that silence was their ultimate weapon. If they destroyed the equipment, never bragged to the wrong person, and maintained operational security, they could get away with it forever. And they did. Someone out there knows the truth. Someone is living with the secret. Someone is watching these investigations, reading these articles, and smiling at how close we've come and how we'll never quite reach them. In 2024, nearly 4 decades after the hijacking, the Max Headroom broadcast intrusion remains officially unsolved, one of the most brazen and technically sophisticated media crimes in American history that has never resulted in a single arrest. The FCC case file sits in archival storage, dormant but never closed. The FBI moved on to other priorities decades ago, but the digital footprint of the investigation lives on, dissected endlessly by internet communities who refuse to let the mystery fade into obscurity. What investigators now believe is that the perpetrators understood something crucial. Silence is the ultimate defense. If no one talks, if no equipment is ever found, if the knowledge remains locked inside a small circle of participants, the crime becomes effectively unprosecutable. And that's exactly what happened. Whoever hijacked those signals understood that their greatest vulnerability wasn't the technology, it was human nature, the urge to confess, to brag, to seek recognition for pulling off the impossible. They resisted that urge. For nearly 40 years, they've maintained complete operational security. But here's what keeps the story alive. The hijacker chose spectacle over anonymity. They didn't just interrupt a broadcast, they performed. They created something so bizarre, so memorable, so perfectly calibrated to generate lasting fascination that it would be remembered and analyzed for decades. Was that the real goal all along? Not to send a message, but to become a legend. To prove that in an increasingly controlled and corporatized media landscape, 2 people with the right knowledge could still seize the airwaves and broadcast whatever they wanted to hundreds of thousands of homes. Former broadcast engineer Rick Klein offered perhaps the most unsettling perspective in a 2022 interview. "What frightens me isn't what they did, it's what they could have done. They had complete control over the signal for 90 seconds. They could have shown anything, broadcasted anything. They chose absurdist theater, but they proved a point that still matters today. Our media infrastructure is vulnerable. It was vulnerable then, and in different ways, it's vulnerable now." While legal experts debate whether the statute of limitations has passed, the perpetrators could still face massive civil penalties and federal scrutiny if identified. But realistically, most investigators believe that ship has sailed. If the hijackers are still alive, they're likely in their 60s or 70s now, living ordinary lives, carrying an extraordinary secret. Perhaps they watch the endless online discussions about their crime with quiet satisfaction. Perhaps they regret it. Perhaps they've forgotten it entirely, moved on to families and careers and concerns far removed from that November night in 1987. The Max Headroom mask still stares out from those grainy recordings, frozen in time, a perfect symbol of the moment when technology, audacity, and anonymity converged to create something unforgettable. The signal that was hijacked has long since moved to digital formats, transmitted through fiber optics and satellites that make such intrusions infinitely harder to execute. But the mystery remains, suspended in eternal static, a reminder that some questions don't get answered, some crimes don't get solved, and some secrets die with the people who created them. If mysteries like this keep you awake at night, subscribe to Dark Dimensions X and hit the bell, because some of the darkest unsolved cases are still waiting to be told.